first of all, capital raising defined. By capital raising, we really mean any activities, the entire process of bringing in external funding into an impact enterprise to support its business activities and its growth. And we'll talk in more detail about this process and each of the steps throughout this module, but there is a process for this. At the beginning, the outset, of course, one of the most important things to do is to analyze and establish what the real needs of the business are for capital. That includes how much capital one needs, but also what type of capital is appropriate for the business, its stage of growth, and its objectives. With that in mind, we advise impact enterprises to develop a strategic plan for raising capital. That includes identifying sources, really understanding the process, the timetable, and weighing the pros and cons of different types of capital. Once you have an objective in mind and a plan in mind, the hard preparatory work begins, really building up all of the materials and documentation that's going to be needed in order to really bring investors around to your vision for your enterprise. And this is a very important step. And then ultimately, when you're ready, the final step is reaching out to investors. I shouldn't say final step, but the next step is reaching out to investors, garnering interest, and then working with those investors towards closing a capital raising round. So why do this? Why go through all this trouble? Why do impact enterprises, particularly of all things, need to raise capital? And there's a variety of reasons, and it really depends on the enterprise. One of the most important reasons, of course, is for an organization to use that capital to propel its growth and allow it to grow much faster than it could without capital. And so, to give an example here, we often work in our work with microfinance institutions. You may be familiar with those. There are organizations that make very small loans, microloans, to individuals, typically to help start small businesses. And because they're lending capital out, their ability to grow depends on the amount of capital that they have. They need money to be able to lend it out. So an organization that is a microfinance institution that is profitable could each year, as it makes profits, reinvest those in the business. It could use that money that it earns to increase its pool of capital that's available for loans, and it could grow modestly each year by reinvesting that capital. But if that same organization has a strategic plan to grow more rapidly, it may need to reach out to impact investors to raise additional capital to allow it to make additional loans. So that's often a very common reason we see impact enterprises undertake a capital raising process. Now, what I just described was a microfinance institution that had a relatively mature business, was profitable, and was just looking to expand. But of course, for innovative organizations that are at the beginning of their journey, sometimes they're not yet profitable. In fact, at some point in every organization's life, they're not yet profitable. And at that point, they may simply need external capital just to survive. We very often see this. Of course, a startup organization will need some seed capital to allow it to begin operations. And very typically, a new organization, as it grows, will continue to need new capital to cover what might be operating losses for the first year or two or three as it establishes operations. It may need and so sometimes that capital is needed just to survive, just to get the enterprise to a point where it's large enough to become profitable or till it's proven the success of its model. And so those are probably the two most common reasons we see organizations seek outside capital. But sometimes the process and the purpose of raising capital is almost to bring in new partners into the business. So we see organizations looking for external validation from investors who can then support the business. Sometimes that's a financial investor, sometimes it's a strategic investor, really establishing a partnership through investment. We also see enterprises looking to raise capital to test a new idea or a new market. So their existing business, their core business may be profitable, may not need any additional capital to accomplish its objectives. But the management founders of the business have an idea for something new, and so they may look to raise capital to allow them to build on that vision. And then finally, and in this I have in mind, as many of you may be entrepreneurs who've started your own business, put often your own capital into it, always your own time, blood, sweat, and tears into it. And at some point, as a personal part of your personal journey, you may simply want to bring in others to help share the risk, and to bring additional people, allow others to both share the risk and partake in the excitement of your growth story.